For 5 endless days, little Emma had cried herself to sleep with nothing but water in her stomach, and each sob tore at her mother Lily's heart like a blade she could no longer bear, because no mother should ever have to choose between starving quietly or begging loudly, but that was the choice life had cornered her into on the barren outskirts of Dry Creek, where dust storms roamed freely and hunger lingered like a curse. Lily, once proud and known for her gentle smile, now moved silently through the war, not one room shack she and her daughter called home, her bones aching from exhaustion, her hands trembling from weakness, and her spirit cracking under the weight of knowing her child's ribs were showing more clearly each day, while Emma's little voice would whisper, "Mama, will there be food tomorrow?" And Lily would answer with a lie she had repeated so often she could barely breathe after saying it, "Soon, sweetheart, very soon," even though she herself hadn't eaten more than scraps for days. But fate, cruel as it was stubborn, seemed to take pleasure in testing them until the 5th night. The wind slammed against the tin walls, and Emma's cries were softer now, weaker, drained, and Lily realized with horror that hunger was no longer just a burden. It was becoming a danger that could steal her daughter forever. She stepped outside, barefoot on the cold dirt, her cheeks streaked with desperate tears, her mind screaming for a miracle, and one came in the form of a distant horse trotting toward her, its rider tall, broad-shouldered, and wrapped in a weather-beaten coat that swayed like the shadows of twilight. A man she recognized instantly, Cole Walker, the solitary rancher who lived miles away and rarely spoke to anyone unless necessary. A man with a reputation of being as hard as the land he worked, but whose quiet eyes hid a depth only those who paid attention could see. He stopped his horse a few feet from her, studying her trembling figure, the way she clutched the doorframe to keep herself upright, the sunken cheeks and tired eyes, and though he had never been one for emotional displays, something inside him shifted like an old lock giving way. "Lily," he said, his voice low, steady, and carrying a weight she wasn't prepared for. "You look like you're fighting the devil himself." And she tried to speak, but her throat felt raw, so she merely stepped aside, letting him see little Emma curled on the thin blanket inside, her tiny hand resting on her stomach, her breathing shallow. Cole dismounted instantly, his boots kicking dust as he strode inside, dropping to one knee beside the sleeping child, his jaw clenching with the kind of anger that didn't shout. It burned silently. He placed a warm hand on Emma's forehead, then looked up at Lily, whose legs were barely able to keep her standing, and something inside him broke. The last piece of distance he had been keeping from the world since his own tragedies years ago. He stood slowly, walked to her, and said the sentence that would change both their lives forever. "Prepare to go with me." But Lily shook her head frantically, panic flooding her eyes because she misunderstood, believing he was here to split her from her daughter, to take Emma away to get help while leaving her behind. And she cried, "No, please, Cole, don't take her from me. She's all I have." And the strong rancher, who hardly ever let emotion reach his voice, gently cupped her shoulders and whispered, with an honesty that sent warmth through her frozen heart, "Lily, I ain't taking your girl away. I'm taking both of you home." She stared at him, breath caught in her throat, unable to process the meaning of such kindness, and Cole lifted Emma into his arms with careful strength, wrapping his coat around her tiny body before looking back at Lily and motioning to his horse, where he helped her climb up behind him. The ride to Cole's ranch felt like crossing from misery into a different world, the wind cold but the hope warm, and when they arrived, the light spilling out of his cabin made Lily blink as though she had stepped into a memory of better times. Cole carried Emma inside, laying her gently by the fire while Lily sank into a chair, her body shaking from weakness and relief, and he hurried to the kitchen, returning with warm broth and bread, real food, the kind Emma hadn't touched in days. Lily hesitated before feeding her daughter, afraid the sudden nourishment might shock her system, but Cole guided her with the quiet knowledge of someone who had cared for her the week before, telling her to go slow, little sips, small bites, watching both mother and child as though he had sworn an unspoken oath to guard them. Emma woke, her tired eyes fluttering open when the warm spoon touched her lips, and when she whispered, "Mama, food." Lily burst into tears so suddenly she couldn't stop, her shoulders shaking as she held Emma close, murmuring prayers of gratitude she thought she'd forgotten how to say. Cole turned away respectfully, pretending to busy himself with tending the fire, but there was no hiding the way his shoulders softened at the sound of Emma's first hopeful sigh. Over the next few days, warmth returned to the cabin and to their lives, with Emma's cheeks slowly regaining color, her giggles filling spaces that had been silent far too long, and Lily, who had nearly lost everything, found herself watching Cole with a gratitude so deep it scared her, because she had not expected anyone to care, let alone a man who had isolated himself for years after losing his wife and unborn child in a storm that had broken more than just his home. One evening, while Emma slept peacefully in the room Cole had set up for her, Lily stood on the porch, staring at the sunset melting into shades of gold and crimson, and Cole joined her, leaning against the rail. She whispered, "Why did you help us?" Not accusing, just aching to understand, and Cole took a long breath before answering, "Because I know what it feels like to lose everything, and I refuse to let that happen to you." His voice thick with memories he rarely spoke of. Lily reached for his hand, unsure why she did it, maybe because she needed support, or maybe because she sensed he did too, and when their fingers touched, something quiet and powerful sparked between them. From that night on, their bond grew naturally, slow, fragile, but sincere, built from shared pain and healing days, from watching Emma run through the grass with newfound strength, and from the simple joy of laughter returning to a man who had forgotten he could smile. Weeks later, as winter approached and Lily prepared warm clothes for Emma, Cole approached her with a nervousness that looked foreign on him, and he said quietly, "Lily, you don't have to leave when the cold sets in. This place, it's your home if you want it." And she realized he wasn't offering charity. He was offering a future, a family, a chance. Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded, whispering, "We'd like that." And as Emma ran into Cole's arms, giggling with a fullness of life that once seemed impossible, Lily knew that the moment he had said, "Prepare to go with me," he hadn't just meant safety, he had meant new beginnings, and in the quiet ranch under the vast Texas sky, 3 broken souls slowly stitched themselves together into something whole again, proving that sometimes salvation arrives not in grand miracles, but in the simple courage of a lonely rancher who refused to let hunger steal a child or despair steal a mother, choosing instead to open his door, his land, and eventually his heart.